All right, hi there. So we're going to continue our Game Maker tutorial today. So what we're going to look at is we're going to try to finish this game out with putting together some the enemy ship. We're going to have a display for how much HP the enemy has. We're going to make it, go faster when it gets shot and do some other fun stuff with the game. And then hopefully that'll give us a nice thing to play with and give you some, enough to like really explore Game Maker some more. So let's get going. So today, what we're going to do is, so yesterday we created the player ship and the player laser. And to do that, we created our sprites of our different objects and then created a room where those things would live, and created the player ship and the player laser objects. So now we have to make objects for the enemy ship, the enemy laser, and the explosion. So let's do that. So I'm going to right click objects, create object. I'm going to add sprite enemy, and I'm going to call this obj enemy. And to obj enemy, I'm going to add several events. One of them is a create event, and I'm going to call this create event draw enemy HP. Is that what I'm going to call it? No, I'm not. There we go. I'm going to call it define variables. And then I'm going to do enemy hit points equals 5. Enemy move speed equals 5. Moving left equals 1. Fire speed equals 60. And restart time equals 120. And remember to put your semicolons at the end of every line. And then we're going to go alarm 0 equals fire speed. And we're gonna, there we go. All right, so what the heck did I just type? All right, so from last time, how to define a variable. You just declare it, and I'm using the create event so that I have a nice, oh wait, restart time is only referenced once. Maybe I don't need that then. All right, I'm going to comment this out. My reference that I'm using is showing that that is only referenced once in my code. So I'm actually going to comment restart time out in case that's just old code from a previous version that I'm not using anymore. If I see it again, I'll uncomment it, but right now I'm going to add 2 forward slashes to comment it out. So, what's going on here? Well, I create enemy hit points. That's fairly self-explanatory. Enemy move speed, also self-explanatory. And one thing you want to remember when you define variables in any scripting, in any program, is to make the variable names descriptive so that it makes sense when you are actually using them and calling them later. You don't want to have your variable names be something like variable 1, variable 2, because then it doesn't really help or describe what you're actually making. You want it to be descriptive of what that variable is going to run, what information it's going to be in control of. So moving left is I'm kind of cheating and making a Boolean with numbers, but basically it's going to be a thing that helps us, make the enemy ship go left until it hits the edge of the screen, then go right. And why that's important is that with the enemy, there's nobody controlling the enemy unless you create a two-player game, which is totally possible. You could have the player 1 use the arrows and player 2 use WASD or something, and then it becomes a dueling game. But since this is a computer-controlled enemy, we need to set up the logic by which it's going to move around. So a good way to do that is to make it so that if a variable is a value like 1, set its movement code to be going left. If else if it's 0 or something like that, set that movement code to be going right. So you'll see that in a second. Fire speed, that is so here what this means is it's the amount of frames that should count down before something should happen. And that's what this is. This is an alarm. And what that means is that we are going to call this alarm whenever we need a timer. So basically, fire, you'll fire, the enemy will fire, and then this alarm will activate, and that alarm is set to 60 frames, which means that every second or so, the enemy will fire. So that's what's going on there. So let's set that up. So again, remember, creating enemies is a little more complex because they are computer controlled. So what we're going to do is we're going to add an event, and we want this to always be doing something. So we're going to use the step command. And step is, like I said in the previous videos, this is where it's the equivalent to an update function. But what it does is every frame of animation will do something. So we go to step, step, and then we are going to, because there's step beginning, step, end step, we're going to do just regular step. So we're going to call this move enemy and check hit points. So this script is going to do a few different things. One, it's going to move our enemy on the scripted pathway that we've set, but it's also going to check every frame to see if our enemy is dead or not. And if it does find that it's dead, then it'll explode. So I'm going to do some commenting here. First of all is make enemy move. Can I zoom in? Let me see. I'm realizing this is probably hard for you to see. So Control plus. Aha! Cool. All right, so that's probably easier to see on the video. Make enemy move and forth. And then likewise, I actually might, on my reference, my reference document, go back so it's easier for me to see that. All right. I hope that's helpful. Oh, by the way, if you ever need to do this on your own copy, it's just like a web browser. You Control and plus and Control or minus. Or I guess it would be Control equals, but it's also the plus button. But that's how you zoom in. Again, just like a web browser. Okay, so if parentheses moving left. So basically, it's just as I said, if moving left equals 1, so there's that variable that we made called moving left, that is our true or false. Again, we're not using an actual Boolean, we're just, making it, whatchamacallit, we're using 1 and 0 as true or false. So x equals x minus enemy, and then let's see what pops up. Enemy move speed, boop. So what that does is that if it's 1, then the enemy moves left. if moving left is 0, curly brace, x equals x plus enemy move speed. Now what that does is that it's going to make it move right. And then just to save myself some, actually no, I need to type these out. If x minus sprite sprite x offset is less than 0, moving left. So what this does is that if it hits the left side of the screen, it changes the value of moving left to 0, which will cause it to move right. See? So every frame of animation, it's checking, is it 1? You know, yes or no. Is moving left 1? Yes or no? If moving left is not 1, is it 0? Yes or no? You know, and then if it's hitting the side of the screen, change that. So, you know, you see it going through steps of, you know, do I move left or right? Am I supposed to change any of the variables? That's what's happening here in this script. If x plus sprite underscore x offset is greater than room width, moving left equals 1. So you see this code, all it's doing is changing the values of the variables. All right, so now we're going to, so that covers moving left and right. So let's, for right now, we're going to hit Control Save. And then let's see if it works. So it's done that. I'm going to click my Run key, my Run button. And did it go? Yes, it's just taking a second to think about it. There it goes. All right, so once it builds, we're going to see if it works. Let's see, did it go? Not yet. No, it's not going because we didn't put an enemy in our room, just like yesterday. So I'm going to add my enemy object. Oh, it's got to think about it. There we go. Now I've added my enemy object. I'm going to move him. Okay, so now let's try this again. Okay. Okay, sorry, I'm just waiting for it to build. It should be popping up here in a second. Oh, there it goes. See? So now we have an enemy that recognizes when it is hitting the edge of the screen, when it should move back and forth. So there we go. So now we got to wait for it to think about stopping. All right. All right. So that was that's setting up the basic enemy movement. Before we proceed, what we need to do is create a few more objects. One of those objects is going to be the enemy laser. And we're going to call this OBJ enemy laser. Okay, and we're going to X out of that right now. And then we're going to create another object that is our explosion, and we are going to call it OBJ explosion. And likewise, we are going to X out of that. And it is auto-saving. I hate it when it does this, but so be it. Okay, and then I'm going to control ++++ again. All right, so the reason I wanted to do that was that the next lines of code, I need that explosion. So if enemy, and then enemy hit points, there it is less than 1, then curly brace, instance underscore create, layer. So just like yesterday, remember, this is instance create layer, meaning that create an object at a location, and X, just putting in XY means just on top of where I am, I being the enemy object. Layer means on the same layer as the object that is calling this, again, which is our enemy. And then what object should we create? We're going to create OBJ explosion. Okay. And then semicolon, instance underscore destroy ID true. And what that's going to do is just destroy the enemy object if the enemy hit points is under 1. So, all right, there's that script. So that's done. And then we're going to save. Now I'm going to add another event, and this one's going to be an alarm event. Now remember I talked about that countdown timer, which we created back here in alarm 0. So this is basically saying create an alarm that is alarm 0 called fire speed, or that is at the length fire speed. So now we say we want to use that alarm 0. So do you see how it correlates? So if we go to the alarm 0 script, now what we can do here is, let me, do something on my reference doc, because I noticed that it wasn't showing me the underscores based on how I had things visible. All right, so I'm going to call this one fire enemy laser, and instance underscore create underscore layer and then X, Y. So one of the things that you should be noticing is how often we're going to use and then obj enemy laser, how often we're going to use the same script for stuff. And that, I hope that actually, it'll sound weird. It's almost like it should, be comforting in the fact that, look at how much we can do with like a certain limited set of commands. We're using instance create layer a lot. And the benefit of that is that a lot, it's very versatile and you can make a lot of game objects with it, or a lot of game functions with it, I should say. And, the benefit of this is that we can make a lot with a little. There's not a lot of commands that go into this game. The other thing that's kind of nice is that if you're learning Game Maker for the first time or scripting for the first time, the benefit is that by having to type out similar commands again and again, it's going to reinforce those commands, and you'll know, like, oh, what do I want to do? I want to create a thing, or I want to have something spawn another thing. Oh, instance create layer. I know how to use that. And again, the tooltips will help you as well. So alarm 0 equals fire speed. There we go. Cool. And then what this does is that it basically just is like, telling the alarm, once you've created the laser, set the alarm to fire speed. So basically this is like, do this when the alarm has ticked down, and then once you've done that, set the alarm back to fire speed, which I think is like 5 or something. No, it's 60. Duh. Time. So you see here like how this is working. It's basically going in a loop. And I realize like that's an opportunity to talk about loops in programming, but I'm not going to. Not to be unhelpful. It's just, you don't need to know. Like, it is a loop. Loops are good in programming because they will just run this command again and again until we blow the ship up. Now I'm going to do draw GUI. Now this part, we have to create another thing here. And to do that, we're going to go to fonts, create font. Now font is a resource. So we want to go over here to resources, create font. And the font we're going to create, it's up to you what you want, but I'm just going to go I'm going to call it font 0. Just leave the same thing. It's up to you what you want to use. Because we're doing a video game, I'm going to use Atari ST 8x16 system font. You don't necessarily have this font on your computer. I do. So I'm going to use it, but you can choose whatever you think is cool. I have it on my reference as 19, but I'm going to, I'll just stick to it, 19, whatever. Okay, so hit enter. There we go. All right. And I think that's it. So I'm going to X out of that. So if I scroll back up, and I'm going to boop, 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 so that you can see. Oh, where did my scripts go? Oh. There you are. Nope. There. Okay. Okay, so in this one, draw GUI, I'm going to call this draw enemy HP, and I'm going to comment, draw text, draw underscore set underscore font, and then this is where I want to say font 0. So basically what I've done is by creating a font, first you have to say, you have to create a font, and that allows you to have text with a typeface. Otherwise, you wouldn't have a typeface in your game project. So first create your font, and then when you are going to draw something like a GUI object that has a font, then you first have to call the font. So draw underscore set underscore font, and then we'd go draw underscore text, and we want this like kind of up in the top left corner. So we're going to go 15 underscore 15 or 15 comma 15. That's going to set it at pixel coordinates 15 by 15, and we're going to here's how we're going to make it say enemy health, and then colon, and then a space. So we enclose that in quotes, and what that's going to do is it's going to put, this is a string, it's a variable that is text. So we are putting like the words enemy health and a colon and a space as just part of the graphic. It will never go away. So, but you know, we do want data to exist in this. So we're going to go plus space plus string, and then enemy hit points. So what we've done, two parentheses, because we have one parenthesis, and you see how it's showing you, and then okay, cool, we're in the right spot, and then second parenthesis, see there. But what we've done is at coordinate 15 by 15, we want text that says enemy health colon space, and we put that in quotes, space plus, and then we want data in it. So we're going to have another string. So again, it's a number, but we're going to treat it as text. So we want to, as a string, put the value of enemy hit points. And what that's going to do is it's going to show us that it's going to say enemy health 5, or whatever we set enemy hit points to, 10, 30, whatever. Okay, so that draws that. And then, last but not least, we're going to create a collision event. And we want it to be, so when you do a collision event, it'll bring up a list of objects. So basically what this means is when the enemy ship collides with an object. So we want it to collide with object player laser, because the player can't get to the enemy, and vice versa, because of the movement code we've put in. So we're going to call this GetShot. And what happens when we get shot? So what happens when it collides with this player object? So first of all, so we want to take enemy hit points, and we're going to equals enemy hit points. So basically equals myself, the variable equals itself minus 1, and semicolon, and then enemy move speed. So we want now the enemy to get faster, because we want this game to get harder and have an interesting gameplay loop. So enemy move speed times, so if you didn't know, on a computer, to multiply, you don't put an X, you put the little star, you put an ampersand, no, not an ampersand, asterisk. So enemy move speed asterisk, space asterisk space 1.5 semicolon, and then fire speed equals fire speed minus 10. Now what's up with that one? Okay, so we have enemy hit points. So when you get shot, you're going to lose a hit point, or the enemy will. But its move speed is going to go up by 1.5 times. So it'll get faster every time you shoot it. And then the last thing that's going to happen is fire speed is going to lose 10. Now, why would we want it to get slower? But remember, the alarm is set to 60, which means 60 frames of animation before it fires every time. So that's so by default, it'll fire every second. Now what happens is that by making that go down, it'll fire every 50 frames, which is 5/6 of a second, and then 2/3 of a second, and a half second, so on and so forth. So the game gets harder because the enemy, after every time you shoot it, is going to move faster and shoot faster. Excuse me. So that's that. Let me see how I am on runtime. Okay. All right. What do I have to do? What's left? All right. So I'm gonna pause here and then start the stream up again so that we can capture this as a video. But in the last video, we are going to put our finishing touches on this and have our cool game. So I will see you back in a second. Okay, and I am back. So last thing I'm going to do here is, take a few more steps to really, add some cool things to this game and polish it up. So in the last video, we made the enemy run. It fires its laser, and in fact, let's actually look at what that will look like. And I'm going to talk while it builds. But we made the enemy move, or we added an enemy to our scene. We made it move back and forth. We limited it to basically bouncing between the left and right edges. We made it take damage, and we made it fire a laser. So we also set up objects so that it could do those things. So in this one, we are going to put the finishing touches on this by playing around with the enemy lasers, actually making them move, making our explosion objects do something, and be able to end the game. So see, it's firing its lasers, but it's doing so, like the lasers aren't moving. And then notice that so what happens here, the text the text goes away. The explosion's not very big, and it just keeps like looping the animation because we haven't set it to stop. And you'll also notice that the game keeps going. It doesn't restart the game or anything, and the reason for that is because we haven't told it to restart when the enemy dies. So we need to do some of those things. So I'm good. Oh, whoops! I had it on the wrong monitor. Well, okay. So you can't see the enemy back and forth, but you can see that the enemy is gone because I killed it. You can see that it left its lasers behind because the lasers don't move. And you can see the explosion being very small and looping just in place. And also the game continuing to go on because, again, we haven't told it to restart or say you win or do anything. So let's fix all that. So I have here the script for... Oh, what are you doing? Oh, that's why. Okay. Boop, boop, boop. So I have here the script for the laser. See, there it is for the laser. So we need to add one thing to this, and that is on collision with enemy object. And then we're going to call this destroy self. Now, why do we want to do this? Well, if we hit the enemy with the laser, instance underscore ID true. If we don't do this, then every frame that the laser is going through the enemy, it will hit. It will register a collision, which means that, you know, if like in the right placement, this could take like several shots out of the enemy, and that's not as fun. That's a little overpowered. So we want it to, when it hits, not only is it going to damage the enemy, but it's also going to destroy itself, so that, you know, each laser can only hit once. And that's all we have to do with this object. So now I'm gonna zoom out a bit so I can get a good sense. We don't need the sprite editor. We don't need the enemy. Okay. So now we're going to edit the enemy laser object. And this one's pretty simple. So zoom, zoom, zoom. We are going to, let's see, add event, create, and we'll call this define variables, and we'll do enemy laser speed equals 10. And that's all we need. This error message just means that if I see variable enemy laser speed only referenced once, well, that's what we're going to fix with this step command. And if I go here, boop, 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 we'll call it move laser. Move laser. And y equals y plus, let me start typing enemy laser speed. There we go. So that means that it's going to go down. And then if y is greater than room underscore height. So basically what this is going to do is clean this off the screen. It's going to remove it from RAM. And why that matters is that if we kept firing away and we were having a really great, you know, duel with this thing, and it was like firing away, and we just couldn't finish the job, and we were playing for like, you know, an hour or something like that, that would be kind of wild. But if we were somehow like unable to take this thing down, and all the lasers just kept going off into space, the computer remembers every single one of those lasers, even if they're not on screen, and it calculates every frame of animation where each and every laser is. So if you have enough of those, suddenly your game is going to start chugging because all of those items are in memory. So that's why we want to, you know, destroy when stuff gets off screen. All right, so that's all that has to be done in the enemy laser. But I do think we need to go back to the player ship and haha. So we need to figure out what happens once we hit the enemy laser. So I'm going to go to collision, enemy laser, and I'm going to call this explode. Instance underscore create underscore layer. There's our old friend again. X, Y, layer, obj, and we're gonna explosion. Underscore destroy, ID, true. Okay, so same thing. We get hit. Now, one thing that's going to add challenge to our game, and the reason that we didn't have the laser get destroyed upon hitting the player ship is that once the, this is kind of a, we're making a rather challenging game here. So once an enemy laser hits us, that's it, game over. So you've got to, it has armor or it has shields, you don't have shields, because they're like super scary bad guys. So, we're going to increase the challenge that way. As you've seen, like if you wanted to, with all of the coding stuff you've done, you could add HP for yourself if you wanted to. We're not going to do that on this one, but it is something that you could add on your own. Okay, so the last thing is obj explosion, and for that we need to do a few things. So first we're going to add an event. We're going to add the create event, and boop, boop, boop. So this is the last object we need to add here in code. So we need to set alarm. Now we already used alarm 0, so we're going to use alarm 1 equals 120. So basically, again, we're defining what alarm 1, how long it takes. So that's 2 seconds. So we've already used alarm 0 in a previous object. And like we could use alarm 0 again, it stands for a certain set of time. So we want to use alarm 1. So there's alarm 1. And what are we going to call this? Well, we're going to call it restart alarm. And I don't mean restart ourselves. I mean we're going to use this as an alarm, which is a countdown object, to restart the game. So it's an alarm that restarts the game. Game underscore restart. Now it doesn't have to be game restart. You could have it be like, you can make it go to a different level. I'm not gonna, can't remember the exact command for that, but like if you had another room, you could make it go to a different level, or maybe instead of it being a different level, it would restart, but a level variable would be 2, and then you'd have a bunch of if statements that says like multiply x, y, or z by the level or something like that, and then that would maybe create like additional challenge, like maybe there's more enemies in level 2 or something like that. But you could do lots of things with this. But basically what we want is when the explosion object is spawned, it's going to start this alarm, and then that's going to make the game restart. So the third thing we want is we want to stop the animation, because like we saw before, it'll just keep blowing up if we allow it to. So we are going to add an event, and it's under other on animation end, and we're going to call this stop animation, because again, once the animation's over, image underscore index equals image underscore number -1, and then so basically we're setting it to an image equals 0. So image speed is like animation speed. And then one other thing that I'm noticing here is that with this sprite, because it was also really small, so what we want to do is edit image, and oh gosh, how do we resize? Okay, there's got to be an easier way than... Aha! Okay, so I went to my image editor. You noticed it was really small. So I'm going to go to my image editor. I clicked this button here that says Resize Sprite and Scale Image. We are going to scale the image to 256. Still going to use that power of 2 by 256. We're going to click Apply, and then there we go. So it's going to be like a little weirdly higher resolution than the rest of our game, but that's cool. Like it's going to seem to be at a different pixel ratio, and fine. So it's doing its auto-saving thing. It's going to take a second because see here it says saving 39 resources. That means that, you know, it's saving 39 things that I did since the last time I saved. So I probably should have saved sooner than this. So good reminder to save often, because then you'll have to deal with long pauses. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click Run, and we're going to see if this thing runs the way we want it to. While it does that, I'm going to check my time. 15 minutes. That's great. All right. So like I said, you know, there's lots of things you can do with this. You can, you know, add levels, so you can add different rooms that it goes to, and maybe those change in fun ways, or maybe, you know, by levels you have, you know, you have it all take place in one room, but, you know, that there is a level, like a variable that is called level. Maybe, you know, move speed occupies, or maybe it spawns 2 enemies, or, you know, maybe there are objects that you have that are asteroids that don't spawn unless the level is at a certain, you know, at a certain, you know, the level's at like a certain value or something like that. Like you could have you could have an item off screen that moves the way this enemy does, and you could have it spawn asteroids that fly at you like this thing is shooting lasers. But so by doing that and having it be invisible, you give the player the sensation that they're going through an asteroid field. You know, so it doesn't have to be that you like place specific asteroids. So now I'm shooting at the enemy. Oh, you know what? I did it again. I started playing my game on the wrong screen. All right, so let's do this again. So I can shoot the enemy. It's a little harder because I can't just like let a laser take multiple shots out of him. He shoots faster. And then there we go. So the gameplay feels really good. It has a good loop to it. You know, I'm limited in how far I can move, which is nice, but I have lots of options. The enemy gets faster. You know, I have a little game feel element by having like just like a big honking explosion. And oh no! So again, this is just like the basic, you know, it's enough that the game gets a little more interesting. Like I said, I did this from a tutorial myself. So you can tell, like I said, it has enough that the game gets a little more interesting, but you can see where you might add like different levels. You can add, you know, a menu, you can add lots of things. But, you know, with something like this, you can get an idea of like, you know, how basic control in something like GameMaker works. We've taken a character, we've moved it left and right, we've used animation, we've made something shoot something else, we've created like a simple enemy that moves back and forth. You know, we've controlled movement via speed and you know, positioning and things like that. And we've added, you know, the ability to store and display, you know, variables like enemy health up there. You can also like if you had weaker enemies, but you had lots of enemies spawning, you could see where this, instead of it being this like sort of boss fight type duel, you can see where it would have maybe like lots and lots of enemies, and you'd have a score be displayed with that text instead, and your enemy player would be the thing calling up the text that we have in the upper left hand corner. But that's it. I hope you enjoyed this. I wish you lots of awesome game making in GameMaker. It's a really awesome engine that has made lots of great games, and I hope you make some more. So thank you for watching.